Greetings, you guys. It's Mrs. Klein.
Hello, it's Miss Burkles.
We are here today with your Lesson 40 podcast. The Lesson 40 is entitled The Enlightenment. There's a guiding question this time, which is, how have the ideas of the Enlightenment influenced modern government?
And our vocab is Bill of Rights, Constitutional Monarchy, Despotism, Enlightenment, Natural Rights, Religious Tolerance, Social Contract, and Separation of Powers.
All right, to start, we're on page 565. All right, during the late 1600s, a new outlook put great emphasis on reason as the key to human progress. This period of new thinking among many educated Europeans is called the Enlightenment, and by the 1700s, it had become widespread throughout Europe.
Scientists used observation and logic to understand the physical world, and their methods rapidly overturned old beliefs.
In France, philosophers or philosophies, okay, all right, championed these new ideas.
In this lesson, you will learn about the roots of the Enlightenment. You will meet 5 philosophers whose ideas greatly influenced the Enlightenment and how their works led to new ideas about government and individual rights. Finally, you will meet several women who played important roles in the Enlightenment.
All right, section 1, the roots of the Enlightenment. Enlightenment thinkers wanted to examine human life in the light of reason. These thinkers believed that they were making a major break with the past. Like everyone, however, they were influenced by what had come before them. In this section, we will first examine the roots of the Enlightenment and then consider ways in which the new ideas of the Enlightenment clashed with old beliefs.
In science, observation and reason were revealing natural laws that applied throughout the physical world. The thinkers of the Enlightenment wanted to apply this approach to human life and experience. Philosophers did not always agree about the answers to these questions, but they all thought about these questions in a similar way.
All right, the Renaissance and the Reformation. The humanists of the Renaissance questioned accepted beliefs and celebrated the dignity and worth of the individual. During the Reformation, Protestants rebelled against the Catholic Church by putting individual conscience ahead of religious tradition and authority.
Like the humanists of the Renaissance, many Enlightenment thinkers were inspired by classical culture. They saw the laws of nature as the work of an intelligent creator and human progress as signs of God's goodness. Often their approach to moral problems reflected Christian values such as respect for others and for a moral law.
All right, now new ideas versus old beliefs. The thinkers of the Enlightenment prized reason over authority, questioned the foundations of religion, morality, and government, and believed that everything must be re-examined in the light of reason.
Enlightenment thinkers also criticized accepted ideas about government. Some questioned the long-held belief that God gave monarchs the right to rule, and many insisted that governments must respect individual rights.
Moving on to Thomas Hobbes' Absolute Rule by Kings. Thomas Hobbes was born in England in 1588. Hobbes studied mathematics and science, which inspired him to take a scientific approach to problems of human society.
Hobbes' thinking about society was greatly influenced by events in England in the mid-1600s. In 1649, the king was beheaded. For the next several years, England was ruled by Parliament's House of Commons.
The chaos of these years had a powerful impact on Hobbes. In 1651, he published a book called Leviathan, in which he wrote that people are driven by a restless desire for power. Without laws or other social controls, people would always be in conflict, and in such a state of nature, life would be nasty, brutish, and short. Governments, Hobbes believed, were created to protect people from their own selfishness.
Section 3, John Locke, Natural Rights. John Locke was born in England in 1632. Locke favored constitutional monarchy. In this type of government, a basic set of laws limits the ruler's power. In the 1680s, another crisis developed. The new king, James II, was Catholic.
In 1689, Parliament gave the crown to James' Protestant daughter, Mary, and her husband, William. Parliament also passed a Bill of Rights, which strengthened the power of Parliament as the representative of the people.
Locke approved of these changes in England. In 1690, he published 2 treatises of government in which he offered a theory of government that justified Parliament's actions. Locke denied the divine right of monarchs to rule and argued that the true basis of government was a social contract or agreement among free people. Under this agreement, the purpose of government was to protect people's natural rights, including the right to life, liberty, and property. In 1776, his ideas would be echoed in the American Declaration of Independence.
All right, Montesquieu, the separation of powers. Charles Louis de Sagon was born in France in 1689. He is better known by his title, the Baron de Montesquieu. In his youth, Montesquieu attended a Catholic, Montesquieu's most famous book was The Spirit of Laws, published in 1748. In this book, he described his theory of how government should be organized. Like John Locke, Montesquieu was concerned with how to protect political liberty. The best way to do this, he argued, was to divide power among three branches of government.
This concept, which Montesquieu called the separation of powers, would ensure that no one branch would become too powerful. Montesquieu's ideas had a powerful impact on later thinkers, including the men who wrote the U.S. Constitution. They made the separation of powers a key part of the U.S. system of government.
All right, Voltaire, religious tolerance and free speech. Francois-Marie Arouet was born in France in 1694. Under the pen name Voltaire, he became one of the most celebrated writers of the Enlightenment. Voltaire believed passionately in reforming society in the name of justice and human happiness.
In his view, the English were governed by law, not by the arbitrary wishes of a single ruler. Voltaire was especially concerned with freedom of thought and expression. He championed religious tolerance, or allowing people to practice religion in their own ways.
Voltaire also spoke out for the right of free speech. Voltaire's ideas about religious tolerance and free speech greatly influenced colonial American political thinkers such as Thomas Jefferson. They demanded that freedom of religion and free speech be included in the U.S. Bill of Rights. Cesare Beccaria.
The right of the accused. Cesare Beccaria was born in Milan, Italy in 1738. In 1763, Beccaria began a study of the justice system. He was upset by the harsh practices that were common in his day.
Beccaria objected to other practices as well. It was not unusual for trials to be held in secret or for judges to be corrupt. People found guilty of crimes were frequently sentenced to death. Beccaria attacked these practices in a famous book called On Crimes and Punishments.
Beccaria also argued for other specific rights, including the right to a fair and speedy trial for persons accused of a crime and an end to the use of torture. In addition, he felt that it was wrong to punish some people more harshly than others for the same crime, and that a punishment should fit the seriousness of the crime. His ideas about rights and punishment influenced reform movements throughout Europe. In the U.S., many laws concerning crime and punishment reflect his ideas.
All right, moving on to Section 7, the impact of the Enlightenment on government. A few European absolute monarchs tried to apply Enlightenment ideas in the 1700s. These rulers, including Frederick the Great of Prussia, Catherine the Great of Russia, and Joseph II of Austria, became known as enlightened despots or benevolent despots. Benevolent means to be kind or to do good for others.
The ideas of the Enlightenment greatly influenced leaders of the American Revolution. The U.S. Constitution also contains ideas from the Enlightenment. In 1789, a revolution broke out in France, and the absolute monarchy there was overthrown. All these ideas grew out of the Enlightenment.
All right, now we're moving on to women of the Enlightenment. The women of the 1700s did not enjoy the same rights or status as men, and yet a number of women played an important role in the Enlightenment. One of the most prominent sponsors of salons was a woman by the name of Madame Marie-Thérèse Rodet-Geoffrin. Beginning in the mid-1700s, the brightest minds in Europe met in her home for lively talks about the latest ideas.
Abigail Adams. Abigail Adams firmly supported the American colonies' struggle for independence from England. During the war, she reminded John not to forget women's rights in the new American government.
Okay, all right. Next up is Olympe de Gouges, I think is how you say her name. She's a French woman. She was the daughter of a butcher. In 1791, she published the Declaration of the Rights of Women and the Female Citizen. De Gouges argued for women's equality in every aspect of public and private life.
English writer Marie Wollstonecraft was another early leader in the struggle to gain equal rights for women. In an essay published in 1792, she argued that women deserve the same rights and opportunities as men. In the 19th century, her ideas about equality for women inspired early leaders of the women's rights movement in the United States.
All right, you guys, here's our lesson summary. The Enlightenment grew out of the Renaissance and the scientific revolution. Much Enlightenment thinking challenged accepted beliefs. Enlightenment philosophers wanted to apply the ideas and methods of the scientific revolution to problems of government and society.
Thomas Hobbes used logic and his observations to reach conclusions about government. John Locke championed the rights to life, liberty, and property. Montesquieu argued for a separation of powers in government, and Voltaire championed religious tolerance and free speech. Cesare Beccaria called for reform in criminal law to protect the rights of the accused.
Modern views of government. owe a great deal to Enlightenment thinkers. The Enlightenment influenced monarchs in Europe, especially enlightened despots, and greatly affected revolutionaries in the American colonies and in France.
Several women, such as Abigail Adams, Olympe de Gouges, and Marie Wollstonecraft, worked to extend ideas of liberty and equality to women.
All right, you guys, remember that we have a guiding question, and that this time around it is, how have the ideas of the Enlightenment influenced modern government?
And our vocab: Bill of Rights, constitutional monarchy, despotism, enlightenment, natural rights, religious tolerance, social contract, and separation of powers.
All right, you guys, so long.
Bye.